Hello, everyone. My name's Phil. I've had the distinct pleasure of leading generative AI at Superside for the past 18 months. I'm going to be sharing with you today how we use Figma a little bit differently, how you should start to think about your design system as a knowledge base for generative AI, how you can do that with knowledge graphs and large language models. And then when you start to plug these things together, all the kind of cool possibilities that kind of come out from it. I've also tried to make it like semi-actionable today, so there's some things that hopefully you can just take away from and start playing with and start testing and doing, and also some things that you should then start to think about in the future. I do want to say, though, we shouldn't automatically think of everything as automation now that kind of AI is in our lives. I am a creative and a technologist, and I really firmly believe in the humanity of design. But I do think about talking about all of these things with the community and kind of exposing what is possible and what our position is, that hopefully you can all have some agency in a world where agents will probably play more of a role within the creative process. But I'd like to get to know you all a little bit better, please. So who here is currently working with design systems? Can you raise your hands? Oh, crikey. That's a reasonable amount. And who's already doing something with AI and their design systems? OK. Well, you there. It's kind of my belief and our belief that we think that these worlds are going to start to collide. And I want to thank Pablo over here as well, who's helped us put together a little demo that we can show this in action as well. I think we're going to see this overlap grow more and more soon. I think what was presented by Figma yesterday with Make Design and all the kind of things they're doing with their UI kits. I think this is the direction of travel. I could be wrong, but yeah, this is what we're going to talk about today. So by the end of this session, hopefully, you'll have an understanding on how to leverage your design system data and your brand data in new ways. Then you can start to think about how your design system isn't just a store of rules and constraints and as knowledge for communication and for handoff, but start to think of a design system and a brand system as something that can self-articulate and self-generate. I think if you start to put these things together, you're going to future-proof your own thinking to ensure what you're doing is interoperable with these systems, these models, these tools as they grow in efficacy. To kind of jump into it, though, Figma isn't just the product design tool for us. So we use Figma as the kind of powerhouse and the creative engine for a whole host of marketing, creative, and design services. We've got hundreds of designers all over the world with all of their work pointing back into Figma and coming out from Figma. And this is kind of within the realms of digital ads, social media, branding, visual identity toolkits, presentations, which thankfully Figma have made it a lot easier in the last couple of days, illustration design, motion, but everything for us always comes back to Figma. It's already streamlined like our processes of running a really scaled creative company across the world. But it's also helped us kind of crystallize our use cases when it comes to what we want to do with AI plus design and how we want to think about our tooling when it comes to these things. So we have been quite speedy at integrating generative AI tools, models, pipelines, processes into what we've been doing across the last year. It's been interesting. We've got like hundreds of different licenses of loads of just weird and wonderful tools, and it's great to experiment and it's great to test. What we have found, though, that there's a lot of edges which become very apparent when you try and use like a diffusion model to try and create anything to do with with UI, or if you want to keep on copying and pasting very long, verbose prompts between ChatGPT and other pieces of software, it gets pretty tedious pretty quickly. And there's a lot of startups and companies at the moment that are trying to essentially kind of recreate the infinite canvas and recreate collaboration and application layers for AI and for AI models and tools. And my kind of belief is that we've already got pretty much the best thing to integrate AI into, and we should be spending our time and attention to get pixel-level control with AI, but within Figma itself. We don't need to reinvent that wheel. And the reason that I kind of believe that we should be spending some time and attention on it is that it's been working. So we've been doing and integrating AI pipelines across over 1,000 projects now. And what that means is we're, in general, between 40 and 60% more kind of cost-effective. It's increased our speed. It hasn't reduced our quality. And we've been doing this in a way that we just hand the value back to our customers so they can end up just doing more work with us. And it's kind of led to this pretty robust and interesting use case for creativity, AI, and design. I do want to say, before I continue, that design is a complete team sport. So everything that I'm presenting today is not really all coming from my mind. I've got a wonderful team of designers and creatives and technologists. I've got a wonderful collaborator in Mushu who have put together a little thing that we can all use from today. And Vimeo is one of our customers, and they've got an email design system, which we helped create. And they've been really kind to let us show that today, and let that be the use case that we can kind of see this stuff through that lens. So for me, design systems need to expand in their terminology. We need to think of it in terms of your design system, but also your brand data, custom image models. And if you start to plug these things together, if you start to plug your design system data, your brand data, and image data, there's a bunch of different ways that these things can start to connect the dots. I don't even know what most of them are, to be honest. We're just getting started. There's so many interesting ways that we can start to think about how, if you start to plug that into that and that into that these things just do some really interesting things. They actually start to get some emergent properties. But it all does start with great design data. And it all does start with taking your unstructured, actually quite difficult to read information within your brand guidelines in PDFs and all the kind of desktop publishing formats, and starting to put them into a format that is really readable by machines and really interoperable with large language models. So we can move beyond kind of asking really basic stuff in really basic chat boxes, or also doing really long prompts if you want to do something actually of interest. I don't want to make kind of lots of web UI for bakeries and kind of just create just random images. My customers want to do things that are entirely on brand, and they want to do things entirely within their own style. But I've kind of covered this, but why make this in Figma? And it's because it's where our designers are. It's where our customers are, and we just want to meet them where they are. We could go off and make a new little widget or gadget and probably get quite low adoption and it not be that great. Or we can start to build things where all designers are, and we can start to build things in a really cool way. So all of our customers kind of operate with us within Figma. I think we've got about 2,500 users within our instance between our creatives, designers, and customers. So if we start to build into Figma, we'll get some pretty cool things coming out from it. So within this context, what is a design system? A design system can be something incredibly wide-ranging. I'm sure you guys have all seen some amazing examples on these stages across the last few days. But it's a set of rules and constraints, and it's a really amazing knowledge transfer mechanic where you can go between design and development And it's a really wonderful way of storing information. What I'm not suggesting through these talks is that we actually use AI to kind of create the design system. I still really think design is the realm of designers, and all the decisions that designers make are the really key decisions to make. But if you start to think about how you can then streamline the process of taking the design system data and make it more interoperable with a large language model, then these kind of rules and constraints have a lot more meaning that can be mapped in quite interesting ways. So a well-tokenized, semantically mapped, thoughtful, considerate design system put together by thoughtful and considerate designers is a really, really powerful thing. And what I want to show you is how you can then take that information and then start to interact with knowledge graphs, and then what you can do from there on out. So on to the fun stuff, for me anyway, a knowledge graph. So a knowledge graph is a data structure that can have more inherent meaning with the data stored within. If we take kind of a very poor example of like how we'd want to store or communicate brands data, maybe not design system data, but brand data, every kind of agency and creative and brand agency in the world still seem to think that PDF is a wonderful kind of store for your brand guidelines, and that the kind of air gap from someone reading a PDF and making their own judgments and then kind of going off to another screen and doing something with it is a really good use of people's time. I mean, that's just my opinion, I'm sorry. A knowledge graph means that we can actually semantically map all of these concepts at a technical level or at a conceptual level across this entire ontology that we can actually then really get to understand the data. So at the node level, where we can actually store values, or at the edge, where we can actually see the connections, we can understand the connections between this data. And if we extract our structured design system data and our unstructured brand data and put them all in the same place, we start to get something that can create more meaningful relationships and ultimately offer deeper understanding and better understanding for a large language model to interact with. So we could spend a very long time, which I don't think I have, on what the kind of technicalities of a knowledge graph are. But the two things to kind of understand are the nodes, which are the individual data points. They have kind of flexible properties, but they can be vector indexed and searched semantically. And the relationships between these, the edges, are the bilateral and bidirectional connections between them, so we can start to map this meaning. So something can be dependent on, a node can be dependent on another node. A token can be semantically mapped to another token. And what this means is we can create embeddings and vector indexing, which makes this information super traversable by a large language model. And so when it is very traversable and retrievable by a large language model, we start to get away from these kind of generic average results that you may get if you're trying to get kind of brand quality work coming from a kind of ChatGPT or kind of any kind of large language model. So we can move from retrieval augmented generation, which is probably what people are doing maybe a little bit with a GPT and throwing a PDF in there and hoping for the best, to graph RAG, where we can actually be really accurate at the value level, but we can be very abstracted at the brand level. And those two things are quite a powerful combination. So if we have a retrieval system where we can go, actually, we want to take this component and we want to do something with it, that can be very reliable. But then if we want to then say, we want to kind of create a concept or a thought or a campaign or some long-form copywriting or some sort of idea from the brand level, that abstracted meaning is also possible to come from graph RAG. So you may kind of been seeing where I'm going with this, but if we have this kind of accurate information, reliable information, we have this reliable retrieval, we can start to build agents. And this is, a very wide term at the moment. So I'm focusing more on the knowledge graph side of it because the multi-agent side of it is still a bit of a challenge. But if you start to build an agent that uses that knowledge graph, it can navigate that graph very well, retrieve relevant context for tasks, and then leverage this structured data and metadata. So through the realms of like a copywriting agent, you've seen things within kind of what Figma have been presenting with like their kind of rewriting things within Figma itself. But it still really relies on you being good at prompting. If everything's stored at the graph level, you can really truncate your prompting, and the agent can do a lot of the work for you. And then if you start to then look a little bit wider, multiple agents. So a designer agent, or something that can make design. I really hope that Figma actually open up the Make Design API, if anyone's here, but please do that. And we can start to build more tailored workflows, start to chain these things together, start to go from this idea where we can go from brief, blank page to first draft design very, very quickly. And we'll show you just like a little version of what this can be as like a thought starter. And with Mushu, you can kind of start doing this today based off your own templates and based off your own copywriting information. We don't need the graph yet, but this is just to kind of get you started. So if we start to then integrate Vimeo's knowledge graph, for example, we can then do some interesting things. And actually, the final thing, I jumped forward a second there. With this part of this knowledge graph part as well, design systems and brand systems go out of date super quickly. I know that's like what a lot of the talks are here about, is in like how to keep everyone updated. But if a large language model understands your design system, you can then ask that large language model to kind of write updates to your knowledge base around that design system, or to kind of write Slack messages to say, this is what's changed this week. So when you kind of connect in these data points together, you can then start to get really accurate information coming back out of it, and also these things are just super useful at a practical level. So Vimeo's design system. If we look at this graph of Vimeo's writing guidelines, their product principles, their brand principles, their email design system, and their image prompts. And if you connect all of those things together and make it really retrievable, we can build an applied use case that we can extract the verbal identity and then hand that off to an agent. We can create the images from custom models, and then we can start to have a copywriting agent that retrieves the guidelines, the messaging. Mushu will then retrieve the templates and the kind of layouts and start to generate all of these things. I think this is going to be like 3 different options at once, but then our copywriters can come in and start to tweak things. And our designers can come in and say, actually, I don't know if I like that. I'm going to move things around. And this is going from blank page to first draft, but actually within the style that you would actually use, and within the kind of tone and the format that is actually useful for you. One other component of this, and you kind of see this with other areas at the moment, is the kind of rasterized graphics element. So what we've been doing, and our approach to this, is to take and annotate brand data. So it could be photography, it could be their illustrations, their characters, do some fine-tuning of stable diffusion through low-rank adaptions mostly, and then we expose this back into Figma with a plugin, which means that we can just stop kind of generating outside of Figma and bring it back in, and having custom models directly within Figma really kind of truncates that process and just meets designers where they are as well. And all of this kind of gets to this point where we can go from maybe like a turnaround time from within our company goes from 24 hours down to 24 seconds. And maybe that's a terrible idea. Maybe we shouldn't do design and come back to our customers in 24 seconds. But this idea is that if we can start to be kind of consistent with these outputs, we can start to think in orders of magnitude of change rather than this kind of like 1 or 2x improvements. So this is just the kind of final part of this, is where like looking at it through the lens of a customer. So, Vimeo log into our little platform. They click that they want something new. They want to create a new email marketing campaign. And if we already have got all of these things set up, they can just add their brief and then choose like a delivery time frame that was previously not possible. So brief gets submitted, our project manager comes back to them and says, hey, we'll just get something over to you in half an hour. You can take a look at these first drafts. Drop this information into Figma. First draft layouts come back, on brand, on style, copywriting, on brand within the design system, and away we go. And this, I think, is just the beginning. Because with the things that like Figma have been announcing, like Make Design, it's a really short leap from understanding your design system, understanding your brand data, and then just going, let's just create the entire kind of first draft of this campaign, like the landing page, or the presentation, or the social ads, or the display ads, but still with the pixel level control that everyone kind of knows and loves within Figma. And finally, this is the kind of thing I just want to say is keep making design systems and keep making your own design. Like, if you start to root all of this in your own data, then you get the agency and the control to do something with it. And if you understand how different companies are making these things, then you also get to have some kind of thought and control about what's going on with you and what's going on with your design. And so, yeah, you can have agency when agents exist, but you've got to embrace it and you've got to understand it, and yeah, keep making the things you are making, because that ground truth of your design data is the most valuable thing that there is. And I think that's all from me.